Amid growing public scrutiny over the consensus agreement between the government and the Gambia Port Authority and the Turkish-based Albayrak Group, the GPA has initiated a series of stakeholder engagements to clarify the details of the agreement. Following discussions with its staff and members of the National Assembly, the GPA held an engagement with journalists from various media houses on Friday to provide clarity on the consensus agreement. These day-long sessions serve as a platform to offer a comprehensive understanding of the consensus agreement, its purpose, anticipated outcomes, and the wider economic implication for the country. Speaking at the event, GPA Managing Director Mr. Usman Jabate emphasized the media's critical role in disseminating accurate information about the project. He noted that the need for infrastructure development at the ports was first identified back in 2002.
Known as the Fourth Estate, your involvement in this project is crucial in relaying important information to the benefit of the general public. That's why we deemed it fit to call you in on this special day and take you through the steps that led to the signing of a concession agreement with a firm from Turkey called Albayrak for the improvement of the port of Banjul and the construction of a new deep sea port in Sanyang. Just to give a little bit of a background, the port of Banjul has been inundated with growth in traffic to the extent that the facility cannot accommodate the increased volume, which has led to congestion, particularly more serious during the past few years. The need for infrastructure improvement at the port of Banjul has been highlighted way back in 2002 when a master plan was commissioned and was prepared by Hamburg Port Consulting of Germany. But due to lack of financial resources to commit to the investments that were required, government had to grapple with the funding options, which by 2012 was not forthcoming. And a new master plan was then commissioned by way of an update. And this was again prepared by an international consulting firm called Doha Consulting from South Korea, from funds from the African Development Bank.
Mr. Jabate also outlined the reasons behind the government and GPA's decision to partner with Albayrak Group through a public-private partnership, certaining the potential of enhanced efficiency and modernization at the ports.
Now, government had looked at the various funding options through the traditional development partners, because one may realize that the first three series of the port expansion projects were funded by the African Development Bank through concessionary loans that were given to the government of the Gambia and on lend to the port. And the World Bank had also, and the European Investment Bank, expressed commitment to finance some of these infrastructure improvement projects. But again, the time it took to go through all these rigors of the financing arrangements, negotiation, going through the compliance and integrity checklist, due diligence report, was taking time, and the business in the port was still suffering. That's why government deemed it fit to invoke the PPP option. Now, the decisions to invoke a private partner in the ownership and management of the port of Banjul is considered along the lines that the maritime ecosystem is changing gradually. And one would realize that within the West and Central African region in which the port of Banjul is located, practically all the ports in the sub-region, except for Banjul and maybe Guinea-Bissau, remain under public ownership and management. Virtually all the ports, beginning from Nouadhibou in Mauritania, coming way down all the way to Lobito in Angola, all the ports are dotted with injection of private capital in terms of the ownership and management, where you have the likes of DP World, the likes of APM Terminal, the likes of Bolloré, and other international port operators. Now, the advantage that private participation in the ownership and management of port brings to the table is that it can leverage on the easy access to financial resources that is disposed with the private partner. They come along also with their management expertise and also they can direct where the cargo goes. So at times, to remain relevant, Banjul Port is obliged to up its game and also look for private strategic partners that would ensure that the competitiveness of the Port of Banjul is enhanced and sustained. These are primarily the reasons why the government of the Gambia and the GPA deemed it fit to leverage on this potential that the private sector has to inject the necessary financial resources to do the capacity improvements in Banjul and also improve trade and logistics in the country.
During the engagement, journalists had the opportunity to ask questions about the agreement. In response to a query regarding potential risks involved in the deal, Mr. Jobate acknowledged that there were indeed risks. However, he assured the media that several of those risks had been mitigated before the signing of the agreement.
Because what the congestion does is it diverts cargo away from your port. In terms of the concession proper, some of the risks have already been identified in terms of non-performance. And the situation where the investor will commit and then not fulfill its commitment is one of the major risks that we have identified. And the way the mitigating strategies have been agreed in the concession agreement is to commit the investor to some bonds. Like a day before the concession agreement proper was signed, the concessionaire was obliged to submit a performance bond, and these are encashable to banks. Now, from the performance bond, there's bonds for Banjul and bonds for Sanyang, both for pre-construction, for operation, for financial reporting, for meeting certain KPIs, for investment and maintenance, and for handback of the facility. So those are the major risks involved in this concession agreement, where the concession partner would sign up to an agreement but then not deliver. So the way we mitigate that risk is to have them commit to bonds that you can encash. And because it is a competitive bid, we are alive to the opportunity that also exists with the other investors that are already in the process. So that's the way we hedge the risk. And if government were in a position to determine that the concession agreement were to be terminated for whatever reason, as provided for in there's a whole chapter on termination and compensation. So adequate compensation would be made to the defaulting party. So those are risks that are also in the concession agreement, and there are some strategies to mitigate them. But by and large, the major risk is on non-performance or non-delivery of the commitment of the concession party. And that has been mitigated by these bonds that I've tried to explain that they are obliged to carry. And one of them was already fulfilled before we signed. And during this conditions precedent period, which is the 6 months before the contract becomes effective, other bonds will be invoked, dealing with the investment plan, the Sanyang pre-construction investigation, submission of detailed engineering drawing, procurement contracts. All of those are bonds that we carry in the
Editor-in-Chief of the Standard newspaper, Mr. Lamin Cham, praised the GPA for involving the media in this critical conversation, highlighting the importance of transparency in such significant national projects.
So, Binta from the legal department of the Ports Authority, and thank you to my colleagues from the media fraternity. Well, what I will do is to thank the management of the Gambia Ports Authority for realizing and acknowledging the need to explain these important agreements their office have made with this Turkish company for the transformation of the Gambia Ports Authority. The fact that the ports management has recognized that there is a need for every detail about this to be transparently relayed to the public shows their willingness and their commitment to transparency, for which we will commend Mr. Jabata and his staff, because transparency, like you would know, these days is an expensive commodity, a rare commodity, if you like, in many areas, not just the Gambia, but all over the world. People want to know what has been agreed or signed on their behalf. So if we have the ports management realizing and acknowledging that it is important they explain, then that's commendable.
The government and the Gambia Ports Authority has recently entered into a port consensus agreement with the Albayrak Group. This strategic initiative aims to modernize and improve the operational efficiency of the port of Banjul, positioning it as a crucial drive of economic growth and development for the Gambia. Reporting for Kerfatu, I am Ramotulai Jao.